right? The next thing we need to look at are functions. So like I mentioned yesterday, functions and triggers, for the sake of completion, we'll learn those, right? But when you are doing analysis, probably functions you might write a little bit. Triggers probably you may not write. But you need to be aware of what a trigger is and how to use those, right? So we have seen group functions, right? So other than that, I think when we talked about group functions, we said there are two types of functions, right? So one is a row function, and the other is a group or aggregate function, right? So when it comes to row level function, we have seen all the group functions that are available, right? So we have seen sum, average, min, max, count, and standard deviation. So when it comes to row level functions, right? So there are many system defined functions. That is, these are all system defined. These are defined by MySQL already, right? So depending upon the type of data on which it operates, there are different types of functions. There are functions which work on date and time, right? So date and time type of functions. There are functions which work on character data. There are functions which work on numeric data, right? So these are all ready-made functions which are available. In addition, MySQL allows us, right? So it allows the users to define their own functions. So these are user-defined functions, right? So based on your requirement, right? For your application, whatever you want, right? So what kind of functions you want to write, MySQL allows you to define your own functions, right? Coming to these functions, right? It's not necessary to remember all the functions, but it would be a good idea to make a note of this page. You can search for, I don't know if we looked at it or not. Search for this. So in the reference manual, right? So here, what I have searched for is date and time functions, right? Yeah, on the left side, you can see, so this is date and time. There are functions which work on numbers. There are functions which work on character type data, right? So there are different types of functions. So if at all you want to do any date related operations, right, you can look up the date and time functions. And if you want to know how to use these, right, so here it says add time values to a date value. So if you click on this, it will take you to the page where you can see how exactly to use this, right? So it says select, add date, you have a date, and here you can say interval 31 day, right? So this means we are adding 31 days to this particular date, right? So if you add 31 days to 2nd January, it will take you to 2nd February, right? So this is one way to check it out. So you can give a date directly, right? And you can try it out. So you can say select, add date, some date 2023. Today is 02/09, comma, interval, let's say 30 day, right? So what do we see? If you add 30 days to today's date, it will take you to 11th March, right? So this is one way to check it, where you can directly give the date, or you can give the date column of a particular table. So we have a patient table, right, where we had the date of birth. So what if we add 30 days to date of birth, right? So instead of giving this directly, we can say select add date, DOB, right? So take the date of birth column, add 30 days, right, from patients, right? So from a particular table, you can take a column and add 30 days, 30 days here, right? So that is how you can check it out. Let's print the DOB also. DOB. Yeah, so 19th September, 30 days if you add, it is 19th October. 14th July, 30 days you add, it takes you to 13th August, right? So this is how you can verify those. So whichever function you see, you just click on it, it will take you to the place where you can, it'll show you exactly how to use it. So this current date, right? So these are all very commonly used functions. So current time, it will give you the current time, right? It'll current date will give you the current date, right? All the three things, there are three, see you current date and current underscore date, right? All three will give you the today's date. So let's see, select current date, whichever you want, you can use it. Current date. Current underscore date as a function and current underscore date as a variable, right? So see, all three will give you the same thing. So whichever format you want to use, you can use this. Similarly, current time, right? So you can say current time. Current time and current time. All three will give you the current time. At the moment, what is the time? And we know now we'll give you the current date and time. Right, so so you can come here and check out some of the functions, not all of it, right? So we don't really need to remember all this, but whenever you have a problem with the date or time, you can come here and see if there is a function that is already available to do whatever task you are expected to do. Okay. Similarly, if you go to string functions, right? So these are functions which work on character type of data. So char underscore length, right? So it says it will return the number of characters, right? Inside the data, inside that particular column, right? So you have the concat we have used a lot, right? Then you can, yeah, this could be useful, right? So left and right. So how to use left and right? Let's say select star from. So you have this name, right? So I can say select left of p name, comma 1 from patients. What is it giving me?
First alphabet from left.
Yeah, first alphabet from the left. If you give 2 here, it will give you first 2 alphabets from the left, right? So similarly, right also you can do. So this will give you the last 2 alphabets. Or if you say right of 1, it will give you the last letter. So this, I think there is a question in your assignment like this, where you have to find a starting with and ending with, right? So if you're asked to find a name which starts with A and ends with A from MyEMP. Can you write this query? That's fine, Vrishali. What I wanted was for you to use this left and right.
Okay, ma'am, I will try.
Did you write? Are you guys trying? Okay. Okay. Rani, that is not right. Okay. So what we want is, so let's say, can you tell me any name starting with a, let us say Anna, for example, right? Or A or something. So what we want is, if you take the first character from the left, that should be equal to A, and the last character from this should also be A, right? So I can just say select star from my MP, where left of first name, right, comma 1 is equal to A, and right of first name, comma 1 is also equal to A. Right? Yeah. Is equal to A, right? So this is what we want. Oh, okay, I forgot to give a quote here. So there are only two people, right? So Alisa and Alana. Yeah, Deepika, you can use wildcard, which is what somebody else had also done. But the idea was for you to try out left and right. So if you have a single character, then it is fine, right? So you can use the wildcard card like A%A. So the next question is, find all names which start with a vowel and ends with a vowel, right? Starts with a vowel and ends with a vowel. What are vowels?
E-I-O-U.
Yeah. So it can start with A, end with U, right? It can start with A, end with E, start with A, end with A, right? But the starting and ending should be vowels. Can you write this? Yeah, Vrishali, Ankita, almost. Regular expression and all, let's not go too much into that. Yeah, Rani, you're right. Okay, so what we need to do is we want to say the same thing, right? But slightly modified. Name. Here we will say in one of this, right? So A, E, I, O, U, right? And write a first name, comma, one and same thing, right? So let's copy this. Right. So this gives us all names which start with vowels and end with vowels. Okay. So like this, there are different functions. Of course, we have seen concat, right, which will allow us to attach two string values. I can say hi and hello, right? So hi and hello will be attached, or I can attach first name and last name, right? So we can say concat select concat first name, right? And then to this you attach a space and then attach the last name, right, as full name from my EMP, right? Let us limit it to some 20 records. So this is what your concatenation will do, right? So these are all functions which work on string type of data. So if you want to know the length of each, how many letters are there, right? So you can say select first name, comma, length of first name from my EM, right? So and limit it to some 20. So how many letters are there inside this, right? So this is the length method. Then I think you have methods to convert to upper and lower, right? I think there is something called upper and lower. So you can convert everything to capital letters or you can convert everything to small letters. So you can say select lower of first name, comma, upper of first name from my MP. Right, so this converts everything to small letters. This converts everything to capital letters, right? So, so these are all functions which work on character type of data. So, so these are all predefined functions. So sometimes we might have our own requirement, right? So we might want to have a function that suits our needs. So for example, if you look at your MyEMP table, let us select right. So we have this hire date column, right? And if at all I want to figure out how many years of experience this person has, mentally I have to calculate, right? I have to do some mental calculations and come up with this many years of experience. So instead, I feel that it would be good to have a method called experience, right? If there is a function called experience, which will take the hire date and give me the number of years of experience, right? So that would be quite useful for me. So I can say something like this. I can say select first name, last name, right? And then hire date. And then I can say experience of hire date, right? So you give the hire date, it will give you the number of years of experience from my EMP, right? So this will be quite useful because I don't have to mentally calculate how many years of experience this person has. So what should happen inside this function? How will you find the experience?
Current date minus hire date.
We just want the number of years. So we will take the year part of hire date, right? And subtract it from the year part of today's date, right? So this will give me the number of years of experience for a given hire date, right? So let's write our own function. So to do that, you go to your workbench. Oh, I didn't open my workbench. And here you can see, go to demo DB. Under stored procedures, you also see functions, right? So you can right click on this and say create a function. Change the name, right? So I want to call this experience. And I will be passing a date, right? Let me call this H date. And this is of type date, right? So function should always return a value, right? If it doesn't return, then no point writing a function, right? So function always returns a value. So it can return a number, it can return a character, it can return a date. So what we want is a number now, right? So I want to see like this person has 10 years experience or 20 years experience, right? So that is what we want to see. So to do that, so we have to return an integer here. So return, we will, whatever we calculate that we are going to return here, right? So what do we take here? We have to select year of now, right? So today's date, you take the year part, subtract the year of H date that you're passing, right? Whatever date you're passing, you subtract this. So I can't directly return this, right? I have to store this into a local variable, right? That is all I need to do, right? So I will select year part of today, year part of hire date, whatever date you are passing, into a local variable called experience, right? So here I will declare experience, which is of type integer, right? And whatever we have stored in experience, that is what we want to return to the, this should return this years of experience, right? So let's apply this. Apply. Oh, what happened?
Table information.
No, it's you don't need the table information. So you might, when you're using your workbench, you might face this issue. So you have to first give permission. I'll put this on chat. If you are able to copy, you can copy and execute this. And then you can create your functions. Okay. Are you able to copy this? Otherwise, I'll keep this page open. This line you have to first execute, right? Okay. I'll give you time to do that. So now that we have written our function, right, I can say select first name. Let's take the hire date and experience of hire date from my EMP limited to some 20 records, right? Let's give this a alias name, right? So you can see this person has 25 years experience. This person has 36 years experience and so on. Okay.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, tell me.
Can you please repeat it again? How can you create a function?
Go here.
Okay.
First execute this command. So this you need permission to create a function.
Okay.
Right. And then you can go to functions, right click.
Where I can return the set global login.
This you can run it on any query window.
Okay.
Right. Then right click, create function, change the name of the function, right? Do your calculation and whatever you want to return, you put that here.
Okay.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am, I'm facing issue while running this set global query.
What is the issue you're getting?
Wait a minute. It's showing that unknown system variable log bin trust function. It's showing like that. Shall I share my screen?
Yeah. Who was that?
It's Harshali.
Shally. Okay, just a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So over here, I'm facing issue.
Log bin trust function creators. Log bin trust. Not functions, it is function creators.
Okay, it's function. Okay, fine. Yeah, okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Let me know when you're done. Done. Can we move on?
Done, ma'am.
Okay. So now we have seen two types of programming constructs, right? So one is a stored procedure. Yeah. So we saw a stored procedure and then we saw functions also, right? So what do you think is the difference between these two? Now that you have seen both, what is the difference?
Like a stored procedure have both input and output parameters, I think.
Actually, stored procedures shouldn't return anything, right? Of course, there is an in and out, but stored procedures are not expected to return anything, right? So you should not return anything from the stored procedure. Although there is a provision given, right? So what happens is the result is written into as a session variable, and that can be modified by some other function procedures also, right? So in general, a stored procedure is not expected to return a value, whereas a function has to return a value, right? Otherwise, functions are useless. What else? How do we call a stored procedure?
Call procedure, whereas functions we use a select statement only.
So when you want to call a stored procedure, you will say call followed by the name of the procedure. And if required, you can pass some parameters to it, right? But when you call a function, this is not called standalone. This is called as part of a, it need not be select, it can be update also, right? So in update, delete, right? So this is called as part of a command. Why I'm saying it is not just select is because you can use it in the where clause also, right? So here I can say select select star from my EMP, right? Only those people whose experience is greater than or less than 10 years, for example, right? Where experience, is the spelling correct? Yeah.
X is missing, ma'am.
Experience. Higher date is less than 10, right? So because I can use it in the where clause, I can use it as an update command. So I can update the salary of all the people whose experience is greater than 15 years, for example. Or I can delete those records whose experience is less than 1 year or something like that. right? So a function is invoked as part of a query, right? So it's usually not called separately. Then the main difference is a stored procedure can be as big as you want, right? So this can be long, complicated tasks can be performed here, right? Here only short calculations, right? The reason is this function is getting fired as part of every select, right? Not every select, every row that is selected by the select command. So if this row gives me 10 records, for every record, this function experience is getting fired, right? For the first row, this is taken as input, you get this output. For the second row, again, the function is invoked with this as input and you get this as output. For the third row, again, the same function is called, but this is given as input and you get this as output. So if your query returns 1000 rows, the function is executed 1000 times. So if you keep your function very complicated, right? If you have big joins and loops and cursors and stuff inside it, then your select command will be slowed down, right? You will never be able to complete a select. For each thing, if you have 5 selects inside the inside your function, for example, so it is equivalent to selecting 5000 records, right? 5000 selects are being fired for just one select command. So your function should be very short and to the point, right? So only short calculations, transformations, right? So small transformations, those kind of things is what you would do inside a function. Stored procedure can be as long as you want. So this is where you will do stuff like taking stock, calculating bonuses, things that you want to do periodically, right? You will write it and keep it, and you can call it as and when you require it. Okay. So if you want to, yesterday we did something like taking stock, right? So we went through the product table, we looked at the quantity in hand, and then we placed some orders. So to do that, do you think it will be appropriate to write a function? Right? Is it a good idea to write a function to do that? All those big tasks, right? So functions are not, it's not suitable for that, right? Whereas the stored procedure is meant to do just that. Okay. So these are the 2 types of programming constructs. The third is what you call a trigger, right? So a trigger is never invoked. For a procedure, you will call it by saying call followed by procedure name. For a function, you will call the function name as part of some command. A trigger is not invoked, right? So it is not directly invoked. So not explicitly invoked. Actually, not explicitly invoked, right? So this is fired in response to an event. Whenever one event happens, a trigger gets automatically fired, right, to an event. So when you say an event, we mean any DML command. It can be insert, it can be update, it can be delete, right? So whenever an insert happens, if you have attached a trigger to it, then that trigger will be fired. The code that is written within the trigger will be fired. So a trigger is always written on a table, right, for one of the DML commands, right? So whenever an insert happens into the books table, if you have written a trigger on the books table and attached it to the insert, then whenever you say insert into books, the trigger will be fired and the record will also get inserted into the table. right? Similarly, if you have attached an update trigger on the books table, right? Then what will happen whenever somebody says update books, the trigger attached to that will also be fired. So two things are happening, right? If you have insert trigger, the record is getting inserted and the code in the trigger is also getting executed. So which will happen first, right? Will it insert and then execute the code, or will it first execute the code and then do the insert? Right? So this can be specified by saying after or before. Right? So what are the possible triggers that you can write on a single table? On a single table, right? Like books, for example. You can write an insert trigger. You can write a before insert trigger, or you can write an after insert trigger. Then you have update, right? You can write a before update trigger, or you can write an after update trigger. Similarly, delete, right? You can write a before delete trigger, or you can write an after delete trigger. So totally for a given table, you can write 6 possible triggers, right? So what will happen whenever, so let's say I have written before insert trigger on books. So whenever I say insert into books, right, some values, because I have written a before insert trigger, the trigger will get executed and then the record will get inserted into the books table. So we don't have to call it. Although a trigger needs a name, we don't call it by name, right? It gets automatically fired when the corresponding DML is executed. So usually you do this whenever you want to ensure that when you do one action, some other action is also performed, right? So, so let's see, let's take an example, right? So we'll take the books table only, and we will write an after update trigger on that, right? Do you need a break?
No, ma'am.
No? Okay. So now what we will do is we will use the books table, right? And here, we will, let's add a new column here, right? So we will add a column called sales. So what we have inside the sales is how many books have been sold, right? How many copies for each book has been sold till now, right? For example, if you have some 10 here, this means this particular book has sold 10 copies, right? Here, let's say 7 here. This book has sold 7 copies. This one has been, some 22 copies have been sold, and so on, right? Now, what we want is, whenever somebody purchases a book, we want a log of that, right? We want to say a sale was made for this book for so many copies on this day, this time, right? So, so if let's say somebody buys, so this is some 30 copies have been already sold, right? Book number 10. So if someone buys 2 more copies of this book, right? What will change in this table? Someone buys 2 copies of the Emma now. What will be changed? Are you all back? Am I
Sales
talking?
column.
Yeah, this will become 32. Right, so that is what happens when somebody buys 2 copies. right? If someone buys 6 copies of this book, this will become 16, right? So basically making a sale is an update command. We are saying update the books table, set the value of sales to be equal to the old value of sales plus here 6 copies, no, 6, where book ID is equal to 5. This is what we mean by making a sale. So now what we want is, so there is a table called, I think book sale.
Underscore sales.
I think that is the one, right? So there is something called, or let me describe it. There is nothing inside it. Describe. What is it? You wanted to say something?
Nothing, ma'am. There's nothing in the table, I was saying.
Yeah, there's nothing inside it. So what we want is the sale ID is auto increment. So we want to put 5. Title is Night Without End. 6 copies sold right now, right? So time of sales is right now, right? So whenever an update happens, I want a record to be inserted into book underscore sales. So what I will do is I will attach a trigger to the books table, right? And the update command. So after updating books table, right? After updating the books table, I want the trigger to be fired. And inside the trigger, I will just write the command to insert into book underscore sales, right? So this is what we are going to do. We will create an after update trigger on the books table, right? So not this table. Whenever anybody does an update on this one, the trigger should be fired. And from the trigger, we will insert a record into the book underscore sales, all right? So let's first add a column called sales here. Can you tell me the command to add a column? How do I add a column to a table?
Alter.
Alter.
Table name. Add column.
Alter table, books, add
Add column. Sales.
sales. We have to specify the data type. And you can also give a default value, right? So by default, none of the books have been sold. I don't want a null inside it. So I'll make it 0, right? So now if I check select star from books, you can see sales column has been added and 0 by default has been put as a value for all the records. So now here, if you go, you don't have anything called triggers here, right? So you have procedures and functions. Triggers are written on top of tables, right? So you have to go to tables. We want to write a trigger on the books table, right? So here, select the spanner icon. And at the bottom, you will see triggers, right? You can click on that. So all possible 6 triggers are given here. What we want is an after update trigger, right? So click on this and it has automatically given it a name, right? So you can select this and this is the template, right? This I will remove. We will make it a smaller name. Book underscore trigger, right? After what type of create trigger, name of the trigger, What kind of trigger? It is an after update trigger created on the books table. And here it says for each row, right? So you can have two types of triggers. One is a row trigger, right? Or a row level trigger. And you have a statement level trigger. So what happens in a row level trigger is the trigger is fired once for every row affected, right? So for example, if you're updating a table and that update affects 4 records, this trigger will be fired 4 times, right? Whereas a statement level trigger is fired only once for a command. It doesn't care how many records are affected. At the moment, only row triggers are supported in MySQL, right? So that is why we have for each row. Okay. So this is the syntax for creating your trigger. Create trigger, name of the trigger, what kind, after update, on which table, right? And it's a row level trigger. So what do we want to do here? What should I write here? What should we do whenever an update happens on the books table?
Sales column has to be updated.
Sales column has to be
updated whenever a sale happens for a particular book ID.
So that is the update command. So whenever that update happens, what did we write? We have written an after update trigger on the books. So whenever an update happens on the books table, what should happen? A record should be put in book underscore sales.
Insert.
We have to put a insert command, right? Can you tell me what you will insert?
We'll insert the book ID, quantity sold, and the title.
Insert into book underscore sales. From where will I get the book ID?
From books table.
See, what we are doing is we are saying update books, right? Set the value of sales to be equal to sales plus 6, where book ID is equal to 10, for example. Right? So this automatically calls our trigger. So inside the trigger, we are writing the insert, right? So normally when you have a stored procedure or a function, because we are calling it, we can pass some parameters, right? I can pass the book ID, I can pass how many books I'm buying, right? What is the title? All that I can pass. But trigger, we are not calling, right? It is automatically getting fired. So how will I get the value for book ID? This has to come from the update statement, no?
Yes, ma'am.
So what we have to do is, what MySQL does is, it gives you access to the before and after state of the record, right? So what is the before state of the record? You have before the update happens, your record looked like this, right? You had 10, Emma, author ID 6, and 0 books were sold. After you do the update command, how will the record look like? After this update command has been done, how will your record look like now?
Same 10 Emma,
10 Emma, 6, 6.
6 and 16.
And 6.
6. Okay.
right? So what MySQL says is the before state of the record can be accessed within the trigger by saying old dot, right? And the after state of the record can be accessed from within the trigger by saying new dot, right? So I can say insert into book underscore sales, right? Old dot book ID, right? Or I can say new dot book ID because book ID has not changed, right? So 10 will be inserted here. I can say old dot title or I can say new dot title. It doesn't matter because both of them are the same, right? What is the quantity sold? How many copies are sold now?
6.
How do I get that? Can I say new dot sales minus old dot sales?
Yes.
So that will give me the number of books that is sold. And the time of insertion, time of sales is right now. Right, so this is what this insert command is what we need to write in our trigger, right? So within the trigger, we will say insert into book underscore sales, not all the columns, book ID, title, QTY sold and time of sales. Book ID, title, QTY underscore sold and the time of sales. Values. Book ID has not changed. I can say old dot book ID or new dot book ID, both will be the same. I can say old dot title or new dot title, that also will be the same. Quantity sold is new dot sales minus old dot sales. And time of sales is right now. Right, so this is what we will do as part of our trigger. Okay, let's create this. So the trigger has been created. Let's now try to make a sale, right? So let's say we will buy 2 copies of this book, right? So we'll say update books, set the value of sales. It's equal to sales plus 2, where book ID is equal to 5. Okay. So if you check the books table, 2 copies have been sold, right? So now if you check the book underscore sales table, select star from book underscore sales, you see 1 record has been inserted saying first sale for book ID 5, 2 quantities sold on this day at this time, right? So now let's buy some 1 copy of this book, right? So book ID 9, we will buy one copy of it. So this is the second sale. So if you select from books, one copy has been sold here, right? And if you check the table, you see the second sale has happened for book ID 9. One copy was purchased on this day at this time, right? So now let us say the person comes and buys 6 copies of this book, right? The same book 5. So that is the third sale that is happening. So we'll say update books, set the sale to be sale plus 6, where book ID is equal to 5, right? So now if you check books table, totally 8 copies have been sold, right? So earlier 2, now 6. So now let us see. Yeah, so you can see the third sale has happened for the book ID 5. 6 copies were sold on this day at this time, right? So this is what your triggers will do. Whenever an insert, update, or delete command is fired, along with it, a trigger that is attached to it will also be fired, right? So this ensures that whenever one action happens, this action also happens. Otherwise, what will happen? You have to rely on salespeople to enter values into this, right? What if one person forgets this? Because you have written a trigger on the books table, anytime the books table is updated, right, automatically a record will go into book_sales. Okay, so this is where you will use your triggers. So normally after triggers, right, after update, after insert, these triggers are written to log the transaction. Log in the sense what we have done here, right? So such a transaction has taken place, right? The before insert triggers or before triggers are used to verify whether certain conditions are satisfied and all. Before you delete some records, you want to make sure that such a record is actually there, right? Or you have to make sure that something else is not getting affected because of this operation. So before triggers are used for checking, right? So you check for some conditions, right? So that is where before triggers are normally used. After triggers are used to log the transaction. This has happened. Okay. So as you can see, a trigger is not called separately. Whenever you want to make sure that one action happens, whenever a DML is fired, you can go for triggers. And just like functions, triggers should also be short and sweet, right? You shouldn't have very complicated things within a trigger, right? Like updating multiple tables, right? So all those should not be part of your trigger. You should keep it short, right? I don't know if you have done this. If you haven't, to go ahead and try this. So, these are the 3 types of programs that you can write in MySQL. So each has its own function, as you can see, right? Stored procedures can be long tasks, which is done periodically, right? You can write it and keep. Functions will return a value, right? And you by doing small calculations or transformations. Triggers are written when you want to make sure that one action is followed by another action, right? When this is done, that should also be done, right? So, so that kind of concludes the programming part of your MySQL. So the last thing that is pending is window functions, right? So let's start off with that. Let's get an understanding of what is window functions. And yeah, so when it comes to interviews, you will see that the most of the questions are from this. Right, you can easily write very complex queries if you understand how this works. Okay. So remember, we started with something called a group function, right? A group function or an aggregate function takes a set of records, right, and gives you one output. For a set of records, you get one output, right? So we can use the group by along with the aggregate functions. So when you say select right, you can say select sum of salary. Right, so what has happened is it has taken all 106 records in your table and performed a summation over all these records, and you got one result. Right, only one row is returned as a result. Similarly, if you have maximum salary, right, it will take all 106 records and give you one output. If you use the group by, right, then it will create that many groups. Let's say select max of salary for each department, right? So department ID, comma, max of salary from departments group by DEP ID, right? There is no table called departments from my EMP. My EMP. Okay. So for each group, you get one output. So here the limitation is, do you remember the limitation for this one? Right, you cannot use whatever you want in the select. You can only use this column in your select. Whatever you are using in the group by, only that can be selected along with any group functions, right? But what if I want to see all the other columns also? I want to see the first name, last name. I want to get the job ID and all. This group by will not allow you to do that. So window functions kind of take out this restriction, right? So the way window functions work is, you can assume that you are selecting data from two sources, right? Part of the data you select from the table, part of it you select from the window, right? So the window can be created by saying partition by, which is the same as group by, and you can also say order by. Partition by and order by, or only partition by, or only order by, or a combination of both, right? So this is how the window is created. So I can say a few things I can select from the table, few things I can select from the window. So from the table, right? So let us say I select first name, last name, salary. Let's say department ID, right? And then I also want to see the maximum salary of each department. So that I will say like this, I will say max of salary over, right, partition by department ID, right, from my EMP. So this is a window function. This is what we call a window. No, not that. This is what we call a window. So what do we have inside the window? We have the records grouped. Partition is basically group by, right? So here we have the records grouped based on department ID. So I will have employee ID, name of the employee, right? The department to which he belongs, or let me write department first. So I will have details of all employees in department 10, right? So like the employee ID, the name, salary, and so on, right? So salary is some 2000 or something. Then the second employee, 3000. The third employee, 2500. Fourth employee, 2700, right? And then the second group. So this is what happens when you group by, right? So for each group, the details will be available here. So this is what is available within your window. Okay. So now what did we say? We imagine that we are selecting part of the data from the table, right? So from the table, we'll select the first name, last name. So let's say the first name is Tom. Second name is Hanks. Salary is 2700. He belongs to department 10, right? And then max of salary, from this window we will select. So from this window corresponding to department 10, what is the maximum salary?
3000.
3000 will be selected, right? Here, let us say 3500, 4300, 2400, and 3000, right? So this is Tim, Jim, Pim, and Pam, right? So now, this first record has been selected. Let's say the second record in the table belongs to Tim. Okay. So then we have Tim Hanks. What is his salary? 3500. He belongs to department 20, right? What is the maximum salary for department 20?
4300.
4300. Then let's say the third record in the table belongs to Mary, right? So Mary, let's say Curie, she is getting 2500. She belongs to department 10. But then from the window, if you see what is the maximum salary for department 10, that is 3000. So that will be put here, right? So this will get repeated. This column will be the same for all people in the same department, but this also gives you the flexibility to select all the other records, other columns also. Okay, I hope you get what this is doing. Are we clear with this part?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
What if I want to select the minimum salary also? So when you define a window, right, from that window, you can only select one value. Even if you want to select the minimum salary from the same window, you have to again mention the window, right? You have to say min of salary, again over partition by department ID from MyEM. Okay, so let's try this one and then we will move on to the others. So we can say select first name, last name, salary, department ID, then max of salary from over partition by department ID. Let's give a alias name as max sal from my EMP. Let us limit it to some 20 records. So you can see there is only one person in department 10. So the max salary is same as his salary. In department 20, maximum is 13,000, right? But these two people have from department 20. 30, this is the highest salary, right? And so on. If you want to select minimum salary also, again, you have to repeat that partition by, right? So you can say then comma, we will say minimum of salary min of salary over partition by department ID as min underscore sal from my EMP, limit to some 20 records. Okay. Okay, so one thing here is because we are repeating this again, right? So the over clause is the same, right? So you can also write it like this. So you can say let me, okay, let's type it only, right? So I can say select this, right? So over, instead of saying every time over partition by department ID, I will say over W, right, as max sal, over W again, same W, same window, over W, right, from my EMP. And then here we can say window W as, right? So then we have to say what was that window, right? So we had partition by inside that. So we will say partition by department ID, right? So window W as partition by department ID. Right? So this is also another way of writing it. So whenever you have the same window, right? So multiple times, you don't have to keep saying partition by everywhere. Instead, you can write it like this. And finally, you can say what you mean by W, right? So this is a better way of writing if you are selecting multiple things from the same partition. Okay. So today we will just look at what we mean by common table expressions, right? So tomorrow we will be using that to write your window functions. So what the CTE or common table expression is you can say CTE stands for common table expressions. So what this says is, just like you select from a table, you can select from another select. Okay, so I can say, let's say I'm saying select first name, last name, then salary. Then remember we had calculated bonus, right? So salary star 0.2 as bonus, and salary plus salary star 0.2 as total from my EMP, right? So let me limit it so that we can have a better look at it. Limit, right? So now this is one select command, right? So I can treat the result of this select command as a table, right? Assume that I have a table that looks like this. If I have a table like this, can I select whatever I want from here? Right, so I can say select first name, last name, salary, bonus, total, right? Where bonus is greater than some 4,000 or something, right? So I can treat the result of a select as a table. And from that, I can select whatever I want. Remember, there is nothing called bonus in a table. There is nothing called total in any table. But the select returns this, right? So the result of the select, I can assume it to be a table and I can select whatever I want, right? So how do I do this? I can say select first name, or I can even say star, right? Select star from where do I want to select? I want to select from another select, not a table, right? So select star from this select command, right? And this should be given an alias name. Okay. So let us limit to some 10 records. So, okay, I wanted to give a condition, right? From my EMP as E, where, right, E dot bonus is greater than, let's say 3,000, right? I want to see only those records where bonus is greater than 3,000, right? So this is what you call a common table expression. So there are certain cases where you definitely need this, right? So this part, so you are selecting from the result of a select, which is considered as a table called E. And from that table, you can select whatever you want. Is this fine? What we mean by CTE?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
A better way of writing this is the syntax, right? Instead of saying this, you can say with E as this select, right? So you can say with E as the select command, right? Then say select star from E, where E dot bonus is greater than 3000. Right? So it will give you the exact same result, but this is a better way of writing your query, right? Instead of saying select star from and a select. Actually, we will create multiple such tables, and from that we can select, right? With E as this, with F as something else, with A as something else, select A dot this, B dot this, right? So you can write very complex queries with this CTs. Today it is enough to understand what is a CTE and how to write it. Tomorrow we will see how you can combine window functions and CTEs to write quite complex queries. Okay.